Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm your host, Billy Mann, and this morning we have Chana Studley. I was calling her Chana. Apparently, like the Hebrews, very much like Irish, we tend to lob letters in and stuff around the place for pronunciations, just to confuse everything. So she politely accepted my inability to pronounce the name properly, and for the purposes of the conversation, I'm going to say Chana. So, Chana, thank you so much for joining me. I put up in your bio yesterday evening. I put up the whole bio because wow, really, and I gotta say, fanboy moment with Babe and stuff like that. You know what I mean? I had to say, we'd start the conversation with that, but because it was a huge favorite, and with my kids, I have 3 teenagers now. That was on a loop when they were small. Babe was, it's one of those favorites of the kids, and I kind of wow, and I'm a film fanboy as well. But so Chana, Hannah, I apologize in advance.
It's no problem.
Your career has spanned, and you've had an amazing run of events in your life, from all the trouble to all the way through to the Oscars, to working as that trauma first responder. There's so much there that your life has evolved into, and it's an amazing story. So if we start with, I'll ask you to introduce yourself, a little background, a little fill, and we'll run from there then.
Okay.
Chana Studley, welcome.
Thank you. It's such a sweet honor to be here and chat with you. I love the fact that we're just going to have a conversation. That is really, really nice. Babe. Thank you, because that was one of the proudest projects that I ever worked on. We filmed it in Australia, and I at the time I was working for Jim Henson's Creature Shop. Jim Henson made Muppets, Kermit, Miss Piggy. They're all done in New York, but I was known for making copies of real animals, and we had a workshop in Camden in London, and another one in Burbank in LA, which I later moved to. And so when I say it takes a lot of people to do these things. Special effects are very much a team effort, so I don't want to take credit for the whole thing. So I was part of there was 2 of us making the dogs in Babe, and so we spent 6 months in Australia filming that, which to me was hilarious because the actual book is set in the county where I grew up in England, in Somerset. And there we were, going thousands of miles to the other side of the world to make a part of New South Wales.
That looks like hope.
I mean, that's Hollywood for you, That was an amazing experience. And when we were filming it, it was the winter in Australia, which is not a bad winter, but we were standing in fields in pouring rain and using a porta potty loo, it was, and then when I sat in the cinema and saw the movie, like what the director and the editor did with the work we did, I was blown away. I had no idea that's what he had in mind, the beautiful, like, fairy tale of it, that enchanting, so it was a really proud moment for me, especially when we won the Oscar for it as well. So that was really exciting. Yay!
My best friend works in the movie business as well, and he's a supervising art director. And so it's when you're with somebody or meet somebody that's actually in the industry, and the final product that we see on the screen.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
The amount of work and the amount of people, the lift that's required to get that up onto the screen is quite extraordinary. It's a 2-year project and a 1.5-year project to make this actually happen. And I have no doubt that Babe was exactly the same, and the glamour of using a porta potty on set, and stuff. It all sounds so.
People think Hollywood is so glamorous, but I spent 6 months standing in a field, basically.
I know, yeah. Where are the glitz and the glamour? As you're standing queuing in the rain for a porta potty in the middle of a field out in the outback in Australia. Oh, the glamour. Oh, isn't life great? I know, that is so funny. That's so funny. But tell me, where did it start, Chana? How did it all, say, the transition from that extraordinary career, and we'd say having led an Oscar-winning team, like that is kind of reaching the top curve of of the business. It just is, you know. I mean, it must be everybody's dream in Hollywood, involved in
Yeah.
anything to get a golden statue. It has to be. And then the
Yeah.
transition from that to that, you know, from away from that particular industry.
Yeah, a lot of people thought I needed my head examined because I worked so hard to get there. You know, we were working 80, 100 hours a week. You know, it is possible to work that many hours in a week. And, you know, to actually get there and you know, it was a long slog. You know, starting out working in a community arts theatre in London is where I started. And then going through theatre in London, you know, Les Miserables, the Royal Shakespeare Company, Opera House. Then I went to, like, you know, made a couple of TV shows and then into movies. So it was, you know, a 20-year career. But alongside the movie stuff and the theater work I was doing, I was always coaching and counseling people, because I trained when I was in university. I trained as a coach, and I actually trained at the Manchester Rape Crisis Centre. And I was telling someone last night, like back in the early 80s, there were only 2 rape crisis centres in the whole of Britain at that time, one in London and one in Manchester, which, you know, 1980 doesn't seem that long ago, but back then it still was, you know, news for women to get support and to learn that they could say no. And we used to go to, like, really rough council estates, you know, in North Manchester, and, like, talk to these ladies and give talks to social workers. And I was trained to work the hotline and, you know, answer and go to court with women, you know, as a very, like, you know, right on. Yeah, and the punk rock music, and it was all, you know, a big scene. And then when I moved down to London and I started working in the theatre, you know, it's like the entertainment business is not a secure profession. It's not for the faint of heart, right? No. So, you know, because there can be weeks, months sometimes in between, especially the movies. The movies I did were very specialized. So there could be 2 or 3 months off in between each movie. So then I would go and volunteer for various organizations, like boys and girls clubs and you know, counseling services, and so I would keep coaching and counseling. So it was always kind of going on side by side most of the time. And then I think as far as leaving the film business, it was more a case of, like, I was really getting into all the self-help, you know, self-development stuff, searching, you know, which is because I was living in Southern California by that point, and everybody there's searching for something, whether it's, you know, to become famous is going to fix it, or to, you know, we're all doing yoga and we're all doing, like, you know, going off to the self-realization temple for a bit of meditation, you know, that kind of stuff. And the searching was kind of like leading me to be really not happy with the work I was doing. I mean, I was very lucky. I worked on a lot of really fun jobs. Like my colleagues were doing, you know, special effects for slasher movies and all. You know, there's lots of stuff out there that, you know, I was quite happy I wasn't working on. But it was, you know, I thought, why am I killing myself for this stuff? And I thought maybe I should be in documentaries. Maybe I should do something with a bit more meaning. You know, the last movie I did was with Brad Pitt and Julia Roberts, a movie called The Mexican, which I was doing more production side of it by that point. And I just was like, it was nuts. I actually got fired. So for only time in my life I got fired was from that job. And because it was all, you know, office politics. And so I was thinking, you know what? And then the next job I got offered was Stuart Little. Do you remember Stuart Little?
The mouse.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Another winner in our house. Mention all the kids' movies and we've seen them for sure.
Right. So the script was amazing. You know, I was supposed to be in charge of all the effects. And I remember thinking, it was funny, for about 2 years, I felt like I couldn't do it anymore. But, you know, a movie with Brad Pitt, I'm not going to turn that down. You know, it's like, you know, like we used to call it the golden handcuffs. You know, it's like, you know, okay, I'll do another one.
All right, so.
Yeah, all right, twist my arm, I'll do it. And then when it came to Stuart Little, it was almost like my hands wouldn't do it anymore. You know, it's like I'd been saying in my mind I didn't want to do it anymore, but I kept showing up and doing it. But it was almost like the universe was saying, okay, if you're serious about this, I'm going to take your talent away. And it was for the first time in my life, I couldn't actually make anything with my hands. I grew up, you know, like as a little kid, you know, watching Blue Peter. You know, some of your viewers will know Blue Peter. It's a children's TV show, and they show you how to make something out of everything you find in the house, you know, from toilet rolls and tissue paper and sticky back plastic.
And egg boxes.
Right,
yeah.
Egg boxes, you know, how to make yourself a Mother's Day present with tissue paper and you know, an old candy box or whatever. And so I grew up just making stuff. I'd been doing it my whole life, shoe boxes into dolls' houses, you know, and then suddenly there I was in Hollywood making like these $1 million, you know, animals. and my hands wouldn't do it anymore. It was really bizarre. And I had to call the producer, and I remember looking at the phone thinking, once I make this phone call, that's it, my career's over. You know, and I called the producer and I said, you know, I'm really sorry, I can't do this for you. And I don't remember what she said, but I remember after I put the phone down, and I was like, that's it, you know. And that was it. That was my career was over. And I at first I called all the department stores in Beverly Hills, and I said, because when I was a little girl, my dream, because I didn't really know about movies and theater when I was really little, but my mother would take me up to the city and we'd see, you know, all the decorations in the holiday, you know, displays in the windows of the big department stores, you know, Harrods and Selfridges, and, you know, and I remember thinking, that's what I want to do. You know, it was like a dream. So I called all the department stores in Beverly Hills, and this big posh department store called Neiman Marcus said, start tomorrow. So again, I was an outside contractor, but I started, so that kind of paid the rent while I worked out, what am I going to do in my life now? And so teaching seemed to be something that had always, like, it really appealed to me. So I started teaching privately and doing after school projects and, you know, after school classes and stuff. And then I got a job as an art teacher in an elementary school in LA, private school. And I did that for 5 years. And I carried on coaching and counseling people, you know, in my spare time. And then about 10 years ago, I left Los Angeles, and I live in Jerusalem now. So I came here about 10 years ago. And so here I started making wedding dresses. You know, if I can make a talking tiger, I can make a wedding dress.
You can make a wedding dress.
It's all the same thing to me. Yeah. So I became the Jerusalem wedding dress lady for about 4 or 5, 6 years. And then it was about 6 years ago, I discovered the 3 principles, because I'd been, like I said, like, just, I got into the Course in Miracles and the Enneagram and all kinds of others, you know, like, you know, meditation, the yoga, and I was always searching for something. So it's really been in the last couple of years that I've actually, I mean, I still do some sewing. I've got a few, you can't see, but over there's a few wedding dresses that I need to, like, fix by the end of tomorrow. You know, so I still do that, you know, because I enjoy it, and it's so wonderful to be part of someone's celebration. And
isn't it?
Such a happy, very, usually, most of the time, a happy, you know, thing. So I still love doing that. But yeah, so that's how I kind of came to be here now, today, talking to you.
Isn't that amazing? You know, there is, and I actually thought you were in London, Hannah. I didn't realize that you were actually living in Jerusalem. So,
yeah.
Wow, what a world.
Yeah.
No, Nicola Bird in the UK on Tuesday, Della Day Jones in Malibu yesterday, and Hannah in Jerusalem today. And here's me sitting in my house in the southwest of Ireland, thinking, wow, what a small world. When you said it, you know, when you just said it, Jerusalem there, I went, wow, just hit me. Look how small the world is. Yeah. Look how small the world is. That through the marvel of technology we can do this. I just went, wow, when you said that is an incredible career. I mean, there is no question about it. That you said something in the middle of that struck me, and with personal experience. And I'll say this, just to start the conversation in the other direction. Mm-hmm. You spoke about the golden handcuffs. You know, and you spoke about that moment where, you know, oh, sure, look, go on, it's Brad Pitt, you know, I mean, so why not? I'd have the Julia Roberts version of it, you know. It says Julia Roberts, so why not? You know,
yes, right.
Okay, you got it. But something else was at play. And I think it's very interesting that it took about 2 years for you to hear it in Stuart Little. You know, because I have found the same in a couple of different experiences in my life where I've kind of gone, oh, Jesus, I'm done with this. But it's taking its time to say it rather than, because you had known about 2 years at that stage that, you know, I'm done with this. But finally actually hearing it is something else. And it often strikes other people as really, like you said earlier on, as counterintuitive. But there's something inside you that says, no, I'm done with this. Yeah. You know, and it's for me, I my own personal experience, I mean, when you said that, I kind of went, well, yeah, you know what? Sounds very like my story. There comes a stage where it's like you've been called or you've been nudged. Like Del says, she calls it the wisdom nudge, to move in a particular direction. But sometimes the nudge has to be a strong shoulder to kind of, would you move, please? You've been, and if we could start the conversation around there about the response to hearing something deeper, and about maybe moving your life in a direction that may not make sense to the outside world, but deep down inside makes sense to you.
Yeah, you just reminded me of a conversation I haven't thought about in a while. Like you hinted at the beginning, like I had quite a lot of trauma in the beginning, the early part of my life. In my 20s, I was mugged 3 times, and sometimes when I go to speak different places and I tell my story, and depending on my mood, I'll go into details about what happened or not, because like intuition tells me, whether it be helpful or not.
Yes.
And this one particular, there was a week, it was probably about a year or 2 ago now. And in 1 week I spoke 3 times, and I told my story over, in these 3 times. And each evening, these ladies came up to me afterwards and said, "Where did you find the courage?" And some of them were saying, "Where did you find the courage to, like survive, get up and keep going after this, violence and these traumatic things happen?" Sometimes they were saying, "How did you find the courage to move countries? How did you find the courage to, change careers?" And they kept saying, "Where did you find the courage?" And I remember that question like striking me, and I didn't know how to answer it, because a where question usually implies a place. Like, is it there? Is it there? Where did I? It's like I went to buy this courage from somewhere. Like I went. Oh,
I left 2 cans of courage in the Mars bar, please.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Different kind of courage. So I remember looking at them thinking, I didn't understand the question, which is a simple question. It's in English. I should be able to understand it. And I sat after the third evening like this, where people were saying to me, "Where did you find the courage?" I sat there and I thought, okay, I'm going to put my 3 principles head on. If people, I'm happy to talk like what that means, for the listeners, if nobody knows what that means. But I started thinking, okay, let's think. I'm going to think now. One of my favorite pastimes. Where do I find the courage? And I thought, well, courage must be thought. It must be my thinking. And I thought, no, that doesn't sit properly. It didn't sit properly with me. And then I thought, courage is an absence of thought. It's when your thinking stops. Because in that 2-year period when I was still, debating, like the money's good and what am I going to do? And I don't have any other qualifications. In fact, I never actually finished college, right? Because in the film business, nobody was asking for bits of paper, and like.
Could you make babe?
Yeah. Right. The only person I ever worked with who I know for sure went to film school was Steven Spielberg, and like, so nobody else went to film school. That's for rich kids who've got nothing better to do. So we just got on and worked and got the paint and the glue and the and the ladder and the camera, and the rest of us just got on and started like learning on the job and doing it. So in that 2-year period, there was a lot of thinking. There was a lot of overthinking. Probably there was probably some anxiety. There was probably a lot of projecting into the future, like if I don't have this, like this kind of money coming in, like how am I going to sustain my life? Like what am I going to do? And that did happen when I first left, and I, especially being a school teacher, I used up all my savings pretty quickly, and I got down to like $50 in the bank at one point, and I remember being on the phone with a friend crying, like what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I remember she saying to me, "You're not going to be homeless. You can sleep on my sofa." And I'm like, okay, I guess so.
I'm on the way.
I was like, okay, and sometimes it's like in that 11th hour when you kind of get right up to the edge of the cliff. And there have been times when I've had mentors or friends helping me, and it feels like you're being pushed right up to the cliff, and I'm willing to jump off. I just don't know how. Like how do you do that? Like tell me how to do it. I'll do it, but I don't know how. Like what do I wear even? It's like I don't know. And then usually in those situations where I've come so close to knowing change needs to happen, but I don't know what it looks like and I don't know how to do it. What I found is you just do the dishes, or you go to bed, or you like feed the cat, or whatever you're going to do, and then things start showing up. because I think, like, I've been self-employed my whole life. I've never had a proper job. Even when I was a school teacher, I was still an outside contractor, and I made up my own hours, you know, with after school programs. So I've always been in this, like, I now see it as quite a spiritually growing situation where you never know where your check's coming from. You know, like anybody who owns their own business, or, you know, like works, you know, from contract to contract will understand that. And I have chosen for a long time now to see it as, you know, the universe, mind, God, whatever you want to call it, is kind of like, is taking care of me. It's just sometimes the money shows up in a wage, you know, a salary. Sometimes it'll show up in a coupon. Sometimes it shows up with your neighbor saying, I bought too many vegetables here. Do you want some, you know, some extra stuff? I've always been taken care of. Even in that moment when I was down to $50 in the bank, it was like someone beeped. It was back in the days of cool waiting, and someone beeped. And it was a mother looking for a tutor for her kid, you know? So, and I was so upset I couldn't take the call at the time, so I calmed down, and then I talked to her, and it's like that kind of started another career for me. And even the wedding dresses, when I first came here, I knew I could teach people how to sew maybe, and I kind of actually started a sewing school. But a friend of mine needed a wedding dress, and I thought, you know, okay, I can make a wedding dress. And I was doing some alterations on the wedding dress, and it was really weird. It was almost like this thought, when it was almost like being tapped on the head with a thought. I actually felt it pop on my head. And I said to her, what are you going to do with the dress afterwards? And she said, I don't know. And I said, well, if you give it back to me, then I could rent it out. And I thought, if I do this a few more times, you know, make a dream dress for a bargain price for somebody on condition they give it to me.
Wow.
And I built up a business as a rental with all these designer dream dresses made by an Academy Award winner. You know, it kind of got my name around. And then girls were coming to me to rent these dresses. So I was then able to make more money out of them by, you know, using them again.
Reuse,
you know, and it was just, and it just came. And,
wow.
and you know, so all of my different careers have like started with me working for free, being of service, you know, what can I do, showing up and helping. And then it's almost like, you know, then it just starts to happen. And my latest, you know, thing with this kind of idea is writing. And that to me is like, has been like such a new experience, because growing up, like I said, I was always very creative and artistic. And I got my whole life, I've gotten lots of compliments and awards and stuff for my artistic creative abilities. But I've never thought of myself as academic. In fact, in school, you know, when I was in school, we had to do O-levels, and we you know, took exams in every subject. I failed my English language O-level 4 times. You can't say I didn't try. I showed up.
Yeah.
You know,
I brought my crayon. I don't know why they failed me.
Right, I got 4 D's. You know, I was sitting it with kids that are like 2 years younger than me, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna try again. You know, and so I don't know how I just kind of scraped into university with like CSE, you know, like some other like minor qualification to get in.
She wins just purely on determination alone. She wanted to be here, lads. Would you just give her the place so we can get on with this? Because she's gonna keep coming back.
Right. Just like humoring me. So that kind of put an idea in my head that I'm not academic, I can't spell, you know, and in fact, that's why I never actually finished my college degree, because it was an arts degree. I actually studied textiles. And I knew at the end of the 3 or 4 year degree, I was going to have to write a dissertation, a paper. And I knew I couldn't do that. So I officially took a year off after my first year, knowing I was never going back. But that was just my excuse to like get out of there. So it's like I sabotaged myself, because I knew something 2 years in the line I couldn't do. So I was like, I'm not going to fail. So stop now, so you don't embarrass yourself. Right? So, and that was like what my thinking used to be like, you know, very, very, very intense. Like people would tell me I was very intense. Anyway, so with all this life I've had now, which I hope to God is not over yet. We're only halfway through.
Halfway through.
Like, and so people kept saying to me, oh, you should write a book. And some people would say you should write a book about the trauma and the violence. Some people would say you should write a book about the Hollywood stuff. Some people said you should write a book about, you know, traveling and moving countries and stuff. And I thought, like they say everybody has one book inside of them, right? So I started writing. And I didn't tell anyone because I thought, first of all, it sounded so pompous to say you're writing a book, you know? I mean, that's more, you know, busy thinking. And I just started writing and I was enjoying it. And there were times when I couldn't stop. You know, I'd have a client coming or a student or something, and I'm like, hold on a minute. You know,
2 hours later.
Yeah, it's like, and it would just flow, and it was just the most amazing experience. And then I kind of like, I think I kind of got it finished, and I did it all for free. I used Grammarly and all kinds of things, just, you know, the spell check and everything. And then I have a friend who's a book developer. So I confessed to her that I'd written this thing, and I asked her if she would take a look at it. And I said to her, please be nice to me. If it's a pile of rubbish, let me down gently. You know, I don't think it's like anything fantastic. It's just my life and a lot of like stuff I also made up. And just please be nice to me. And it's so funny. Remember I said about when I looked at the phone and I had to call the producer to tell her that I was gonna, you know, I've been through some scary things in my life. That was quite an important moment. But pressing send when I sent her my book was one of the scariest things I've ever done. Because the opportunity for judgment, vulnerability, you know, rejection, all those things, I felt so vulnerable. Because nearly everything else I've ever done has usually been a team effort. You know, it's usually like, you know, you can blame somebody else if it doesn't work or whatever. You know, even teaching, it's like, well, it's the kids, you know. And so this was just me. It was just me and what I'd written. And she read a couple of chapters and she said, it's good, let's develop it, keep going.
Brilliant.
And so we worked on it. And then I wanted another friend to read it because it had a lot of like these new ideas that, you know, this new paradigm, you know, 3 principles ideas in it. So I wanted someone who knew about that to look it over. So my friend Shifra Chesler, she's Shal Rosenblatt's daughter. She was living here. And so I printed it out for her to read. And I dropped it off at her house. And I'm not kidding. The next morning, I woke up with the ideas for 4 more books. You know, it's like once I let go of this idea, I'm not academic, I can't write, that's not me, that's other people. It just like boom, 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 boom. It's like these stories were coming, and so I've now written 2 more. I'm about to hire an editor for the second one. I think will be published next. I sent her a message this morning. Yes, I spent lockdown writing, which was a great opportunity, and now I just see like when you like we have so many stories in our heads about that's not me, I can't do that. You know, I'm shy, I can't speak, or I'm not, you know, creative, or I can't sing, or whatever it is. We have all these like ideas in our heads. And once I let go of that idea, like this just fountain of creativity or intuition, inspiration just comes. And it's been, you know, that's my latest exciting thing that's been happening to me. Yeah.
Isn't that brilliant? You know, one of my favorite questions when I'm working with a client and the subject of I can't do that comes up. You know, one of the things that really struck me recently is the collapse of the story. There is no I can't do this to I can do this, because it doesn't actually exist. When we have when it's in what I would refer a solid form of a belief, for the want of a better description, that's the only language that comes to mind right now. It seems there's a point A to point B. You know, I need to go from not being academic and not being able to doing it to this, but it's not like that at all.
No,
there is no story in between. You know, it's just that one day you wake up and you kind of go, oh, well, that's not true. That's actually just not true. So there's never been A to B. It's just a recognition that A never existed in the first place.
Right.
and like when one of my favorite questions, when somebody runs up against this in the conversation, the question I will always ask them is, who would you be without this thought? Just who would you be without this thought?
Right.
You know, and it's to be, everything you're saying kind of, as it were, affirms what I see to be true. Like there's that moment when, wait a second, I could actually run a dressage business. Boom,
Mm-hmm.
lights up. But you to couple that with something that you did say earlier on, was when you're stuck, or it appears to be stuck, or when you want to start moving, take a step.
Yeah.
Wash the bloody dishes.
Right, because that's something I messaged to one of the, I mentor quite a lot of people, and I really enjoy doing that, because it's like being people's cheerleader, and like having a front row seat in watching other people, you know, develop and flower and grow. And I sent that to someone this morning. I said, action creates. I just wrote those 2 words. When you take action, it creates, because a lot of us, and we start overthinking it, and then I've got to get it perfect. That was like one of the things I think that stopped me with the book for a while, was it's got to be perfect before I show anybody, you know, or it's got to be perfect before it gets published. Like, there are so many typos in my first book, you know. I learned a lot doing that one, and I now know you can take it's self-published on Amazon, so I know that you can take it down. I could fix all those, but I can't be bothered because I'm on to the next thing now.
Yes.
You know, so like that, nothing is perfect. Like, only, I mean, you know, God, the universe is perfect. It's like there's, and all I can show, like, but if I sit there and I think about it too much, it's, first of all, it'll never be perfect, and it's never actually going to happen, you know, and then I get stuck and I get paralyzed by that. And just making a start, moving, the movement, the action is what creates. Creation comes out of movement. Yeah. And that's been, show up anyway.
I read this quote a long time, and it's something, and I don't know where I saw it, and where I'm sorry I never held on to it, but it's from Picasso, where he said, inspiration is waiting. Sorry, inspiration is coming, but it must find you working.
Yeah.
It must find you working. You must be moving towards it. You just must be doing something. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing the exact thing, but you're open to receiving,
right?
Because you're in motion of the receipt, for want of a better description. And this, for all of us, this desire for perfection has more to do with I'm not good enough, and what will the world think of me, rather than bringing it to life and let the world make its own decisions while you move on and allow the next thing to come through you. And I think that is so wonderful. And for me, I made my life incredibly complicated because of that very thing. You know, geez, I'd get this brilliant idea, and then I'd be mulling on it, and the problem was, the moment I started to mull on it, that was when my insecurity took over. And the mulling was just, well, that's a brilliant idea. And before I even got out of the bed, I might have talked myself out of it.
But you know, that's where I see the connection between my career before and what I do now, is that in Hollywood, I was doing special effects. And my whole career was to convince you that something was real that wasn't. You know, like when I tell people I made the dogs in Babe, people say to me, there's no puppets in that movie. So I'd say to them, does your dog talk? And they'd say, well, but it's computers. I'm like, not in 1994, it wasn't, right?
It's true.
They were puppets with,
it was animatronics, yeah.
It was animatronics. And so people go, you know, and so when I'm coaching people and I'm trying to explain these ideas to them, I say, like, isn't that amazing? Like, our mind, our consciousness has a better special effects department than me and Steven Spielberg ever could come up with, because my mind convinces me of things that aren't true all the time, you know. And when it like that, like you said, that little, you know, the little insecure thought starts going, and you like, well, you know, people are going to laugh at you if you try and do this, you know, or it's never going to work, or, you know, you'll do it later, or, you know, that kind of stuff, you know, whatever the conversation is happening in the back of your mind. And then when that starts kind of getting a bit louder and a bit busier, and you actually think about, you know, maybe leaving your job to be self-employed, or to, you know, put a piece of art up, or something, or whatever it is, step outside your comfort zone, and then your heart starts pounding and you can't breathe properly because you're like, you know, that's the special effects that the body can produce to then start making you feel, well, my hands are shaking, it must be scary, it must be true. And it all came from a thought story that was completely made up in the first place. So that's where I started seeing the connection between, because sometimes people say, like, that's so weird to go from like Hollywood special effects to coaching people. I'm like, actually, it's not so different. because it's all about illusion. It's all about
principles, as it were, remain the same.
Yeah,
The creation
definitely.
of illusion. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Mm-hmm.
a great way. That's a great way of putting it together. You
Mm-hmm.
know, of the learning. And when I spoke about this, funnily enough, with somebody the other day about the danger of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You know, and sometimes when somebody comes across the principles or so, and they want to jettison all of this, what they forget is their life has been one giant experience,
Mm-hmm.
informing all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And when, with the proper use of the past, as it were, the lessons that we have learned from the past, not, you know, we can all be tackling experiences and stuff. And you're the perfect example of it in the essence of what you have been through. Despite all the glitz and glamour, you also had those occasions in your life which are traumatizing. We can't deny that. There's never going to be a denial that trauma has profound effects on anybody's life.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But you can also live past them perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
That there will come a moment where it stops being about that. It stops being about the pain, and it stops being about, but it also informs you to like you say, stand inside in those women's meetings and tell your story
Mm-hmm.
without reliving of the event.
Yeah, that's been a huge shift, because when I would tell my story before, I'd have you crying, I'd have you feeling sorry for me, I could manipulate you, I could impress you with how courageous I was. You know, there was always like I was always up to something when I tell the story. You know,
you were eliciting a response of some sort.
Right. I could manage to get any conversation around to like back to me and like these terrible things that happened to me. And you're right, they were terrible. It was, you know, because sometimes people think that like, well, you must be in denial about it now. In fact, a couple of years ago, Mara Gleason Olsen, she was here in Israel, and we did a conference at Hebrew University. And so she asked me to speak on a panel called Reimagining Fear. And I told my story in front of a lot of people who come from more traditional background, you know, like people, university types. And they could not believe how I could sit there and tell my story in such a neutral way, in quite detail, but like not be affected by it. Mm-hmm. And they kind of said like, well, either, you know, you're in denial or like they just couldn't understand it. And I said, well, first of all, it's not happening right now. It was, first of all, it was 30 years ago, thank God. Mm-hmm. And time does heal, but we also know people who've been through terrible things 50, 60 years ago and are still living in the pain of it. So I said, it's not in my head anymore. It's not who I am. And I only tell it now, like I said earlier, if I think it's going to be helpful.
Yes.
You know, for like maybe somebody can identify with it, that, you know, that they've gone through something terrible or something similar, and to see that you can get free of it. That like our friend Dr. Bill Pettit says, you know, never broken, you know, don't need fixing. What happened to me didn't break me. I thought it did, but there's something inside of me that everybody has that cannot be broken. But it just got covered up with piles and piles of stinky thinking, old ideas, belief systems, things that other people told me and taught me. And once I kind of started seeing through the illusion of that's not who I am, and that's not my identity, and I can make a new identity. I can be anything I want. And like you said earlier, just like one new thought, and I was free of it. And it's you know, it's been a like all of it now, like you said, like that's my life, that I can now use, like draw on all those things to help other people and give them the confidence. Well, I'm not giving them confidence. They like show them that they have it themselves, and they're just, when they see it in me, and then they like, you know what, when that kind of shift happens in their thinking, that they see that they can do it too, and they can get free of it, and they can go on and do pretty much whatever they want. And then
it was funny yesterday, myself and Del were talking about this. You know, Del's really, the area that she's incredibly passionate about is narcissism codependency, which is, in my experience, far more prevalent than people are aware of, because we can all, like you said it there yourself, there is an element of it in all of us that we'd like to manipulate a situation sometimes to suit ourselves and stuff. And so there are tendencies of that, but we were laughing about certain things because we've both experienced it in our lives, and we were light and we were holding it light.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of the conversation yesterday, we said the reason why we're holding it light is because it is light now to us.
Yeah.
It is light to us. And what we want to see, and what we want you to see, if you're a person that's involved or stuck in a narcissistic relationship or an abusive relationship, there is a door out, whether it's a physical door or a psychological door.
Mm-hmm.
There is a way out, and there is a great life beyond it. It may not appear like it right now,
Mm-hmm.
but we want you to see that it's actually possible. That that we're actual examples of people who have moved past all of that. And
Yeah.
we could sit with it, we could discuss it, we could, tell the experiences of it, and recognize it. But in the middle of it, and in the middle of these traumatic situations, it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't look like it, because in those moments, whether it's violence or it's a very dark place.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything seems to have collapsed inwards.
Right.
But that's not true either. That's not true either. Either is, oh, I'm never going to get out of this. I'm never going to get past this. This is my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been part of the arc of all of these conversations. Mm-hmm. It's like kind of being my guiding principle. No matter how far you think you're gone, there's always a way back.
Right.
There's always the way back.
Always. Because when I was in the dark depths of my PTSD, sitting terrified in my squat in London, and like I knew that if I left the house, I was going to die, because 3 times I'd gone out the house innocently. It wasn't just like one time was 6 o'clock in the evening, another time 10 in the evening. It wasn't like I was doing anything outrageously dangerous or anything. Mm-hmm. And I got seriously hurt, fractured skull, broken neck, I almost died. And so you couldn't have convinced me otherwise, because I had evidence.
Yeah, totally.
I had evidence.
And lots of it.
Right. I had police reports and x-rays to prove that the world is a very dangerous place. And so that's the way the world was for me. I knew that if a bus would run me over, I knew that I was in danger. And whilst I lived in that story, that's what the world was for me. And, now, not like it's 30 years later, but like even a few years, 6 months after I kind of had a shift in thinking, I was getting on buses and going out my door and not even thinking about it anymore. And for a long time, footsteps behind me used to freak me out. Like that's kind of like a hypervigilance thing that's very typical of people with PTSD.
Right.
And I've been realizing recently that my hypervigilance, which originally was about danger and looking out there, like those footsteps, that noise, what's coming. I think as I got into more and more self-help and self-development, all that stuff, the hypervigilance kind of, it subsided in terms of danger. But I think the perfectionist part of me kind of turned it inward. And I started using self-development and self-help to be vigilant about my thinking and about my interior life. And I've just been seeing that recently about how, I'd write gratitude lists, or, I'd have like all these things I needed to do each day and I had to check them off, and if ever I got any depressing kind of dark negative thinking, like that's not allowed, like that, push that over there, very, very, like the thought police were employed, all the time to keep me straight so that I could then not go back into that darkness.
Yeah.
All coming from fear. And like the work I do now, I work with a lot of people with chronic pain, and I see that in myself now, and I help them to see it, that we've gotten very vigilant about our thinking. And in the pain world, there's a lot of emphasis on journaling and creative writing, write out that stuff. And in trauma too, like that people, there's a therapy where they make people write it out like a play and get people to act it out. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, these poor people were tortured the first time, and now you're going to make them act it out, like, relive it and relive it and relive it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there, like Sid Banks said, there's no healing in the past. And like, but that's the kind of conventional approach and traditional therapeutic modalities that they use now.
Well-meaning, but
Yes, yes, and as we'd say, innocently
Yes.
misunderstanding
Mhm.
that that there is no healing in the past. In fact, in terms of pain, what it's actually doing, and for me and a lot of other people I've seen now, is by going back into the past, you're actually dysregulating the nervous system again because you're reliving and remembering
Mhm.
and it doesn't have to be some horrible trauma like the kind of things I went through. It could be just like hurt feelings, a broken heart. It could be, you know, a memory of a mistake you made, or a fear about the future of something's coming up and you're like, you know, got a fear about it. Your body only knows right now. So if I'm
Correct.
thinking those thoughts right now, whether it's past or future, I'm sending stress hormones and chemicals into my body, and my body is then being dysregulated. And a lot of people, like I was talking to my family doctor a few months ago before the whole lockdown thing, and she said to me, because I told her about the kind of work I do, and she said, you know, everybody who comes through my door right now is either maternity or stress-related illness. She described it as the epidemic of the age, and this is obviously before the pandemic we've had now. But she said stress-related illness was the epidemic of the age. Like 100 years ago, we were battling cholera and typhoid and, you know, things like that. And then
Wow.
thank God we learned, you know, about germs and got antibiotics. And so that, you know, that we don't, most of us don't have to, you know, face those kind of challenges now. But the challenges we're facing as a generation, as a time in this history of this universe is like internal, it's stress related. And that is all that speeded up thinking. And then we get back pain, and we get knee pain, and we get stomach problems, and we get migraines, and we get eczema. I read this. I've read a lot of pain research over the last years, to, you know, and one of the most powerful things I read was a report from a doctor who had started out as a dermatologist, and he said he saw that most of his patients, you know, with eczema, psoriasis, and acne, those kind of things, he said, my patients are weeping through their skin. And when I read that, it just broke my heart, because
You could
he's
see the pain.
you could see the pain. So he actually changed to psychology or psychiatry. He changed his specialty because he wanted to, like we say, kind of go upstream and help people before it gets to, like, starts manifesting in the body, you know, and starts sending us signals. And if we don't listen to those signals, you know, then it can get really, you know, serious physical
Mhm.
problems. So a lot of the work I'm doing now is with people who have gotten into this perfectionist mindset where everything has to be right, and like hypervigilant, and that overthinking has manifested into their physical bodies. And it's amazing to see people getting well when their thinking starts calming down, when they start
Mhm.
seeing that they've been living up in their heads and all this, you know, overthinking. And as it starts to subside, like, you know, like that snow globe analogies, which is so cool, you
Mhm.
know, that we have innate resilience to heal ourselves. Our bodies do, our minds do. And I think that's what happened to me. I didn't know it. It's just it's because it's like everybody has this gift of being able to heal and get in touch, like you're saying, but get in touch with that wisdom and that resilience that belongs to everybody. You know, then good health, good mental health is there for everybody. We just need to see through the illusion of the thinking that's stopping us.
Yeah, I had John L. Mokadim and Karen Fritz DeMarco on as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you're aware that their research was peer reviewed as
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
you know,
amazing.
and like literally the work you're doing is the work they're doing. And this is moved in, we're now moving into a realm of mind body
Mm-hmm.
where they're not a separate unit. It isn't just about healing the body, it's about the healing of the mind. But when one heals, the other heals with it. But
Mm-hmm.
usually it's the misunderstanding, like they were saying, was that they need to be healed separately, or they're
Yeah,
separate units. Or,
yeah.
but actually, truth be known, once this starts to heal,
Mm-hmm.
working on the body is actually quite easy afterwards, because the body is moving in that direction,
Yeah.
because you're bringing to life that which you believe to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment that we see past that, the more I remember when I came across it first, a number of my medical issues just started to drop away about 12 months later. You know, my liver was out, my on all of those things. I issues with my blood pressure, issues with just little things like that. That every time I went to have my bloods done, there was always a certain couple of markers that were just here. They shouldn't be here, but they were here.
Right.
And even though my doctor every now and he's a great guy, he really is. He's funny and he's incredibly supportive. And he will send me a message if he hasn't seen me, and he said, "You need to come in," because at the time when this all started, many years ago, my cholesterol was 15. By all the laws of averages, basically what was going through my system was fat. It wasn't blood. And so he's always been vigilant, and he always makes sure, and he'll send me a reminder, "Hey man, just come in and get your bloods done," or whatever. But the arc has been the same for the last 6 years.
That's great.
I have no cholesterol medication. I have all these meds have dropped out. The only one he won't let me come off is my blood pressure medication. I don't know why, but he's insistent that I stay on it.
Okay.
And he says, what he was saying to me was that, look, and now that I'm actually talking to you, oh my God, this is it. He says in some cases, he said, it's not you or your stress. He said your body is out of regulation, and sometimes it may require this. And and like we were saying, who was saying it to me the other day? That Sid was saying, there's wisdom in medication. Bill was saying, I think it was Bill Pickett was saying it, that there is wisdom in medication. This isn't anti-medication. We're not talking about that stuff. Well, that's not what we're pointing to. Is the fact that there are a lot of the ailments and the pain that's in the body, not the medical issues that were like diabetes or that. That's not what we're talking about. When there's no saying you can give off all your medication. Sometimes there's incredible wisdom in medication. Insulin has saved millions and millions and millions of people. There's medication out there, people with thyroid issues. That's not what we're talking about. But if I'm gathering what you're saying to me is the fact that the elements of pain and all of that type of stuff can actually be totally reversed.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Because I had terrible back pain. I mean, I was almost paralyzed several times. I mean, thank God it was temporary, but at the time you don't know that. So it was terrifying. And the doctors always said to me, well, it's because of these injuries, or it's because I actually have one leg a little bit longer than the other. So that means your pelvis is slanted. So that means your back's unstable. And so I'm not a doctor, so I would listen to all this stuff, and I'd wake up sometimes with like my arm paralyzed and like numb, and they'd say that's because the nerve of your arm is coming from your neck where it was broken. And you know what? My leg is still a little bit longer than the other. My pelvis is still slanted, and I don't have pain anymore.
What?
And those 3 herniated discs, which they said were causing the pain, are in the same condition now. They healed like 25 years ago, from what I understand now, and the fractures in my neck healed 25, 30 years ago now. So all those symptoms I was getting were, like I now understand it was coming from stressful thinking. And I mean, obviously it's a bit more complicated than that. And
I know we're at the top of it. I get you totally.
Yeah. So, but it's such a great conversation to start seeing through the special effects, the illusion of what the body can do, and really it's doing. I see it now as just it's doing it to get my attention. It's happening to if you put your hand on a hot stove, you don't really need a technique to learn how to take your hand off the stove, right? It's just we have this inbuilt intelligence in our bodies. And that intelligence, which is already making my heart beat and making my immune system work, is also sending me messages sometimes when my muscles get too tight. In fact, we just had the 3 Principles conference a couple of weeks ago, and when I was listening to some of the other speakers, the word I kept hearing all the time was constricted. I don't know why, like when if you want to buy a black car, you start seeing black cars everywhere, it's like, and I heard this word constricted, and I can't remember which speaker said it, but it kind of resonated with me because muscles constrict, when we get tense. So if my thinking constricts, like we were saying earlier, like it gets all wrapped up in a very small place, then my muscles start to constrict, and then I get scared, And then my world started to constrict. Like I got stuck in my bedroom. I couldn't even get out of my bedroom, let alone my apartment, you know. So that word constriction kind of really started resonating with me, that it's like that is overthinking. That is a symptom of overthinking, constriction in all those physical, spiritual, you know, emotional, geographical, you know, areas. And the opposite of constriction is I guess relax. It's love.
It's expansion.
Expansion. It's abundance. It's like it's glorious. You know, it's like all those things which used to terrify me. I hated happy people before because they must be stupid. Don't you know what's going on in the world?
Yeah. You're far too happy for God. Stop it. You're too happy, you know.
Right. Yeah, I hated them.
Here comes that Hannah with a big smile in her face. Oh, no, please, no. There's something wrong with her. She's too happy.
Right. So I'm now one of those annoying happy people, you know?
Yay! Oh, fuck off. Leave me alone. Don't you know the world is collapsing around me?
Yeah, no wonder people used to say, like, you're so intense. I'm like, well, don't you know what's happening?
Oh, you know, and it can be profoundly irritating for people sometimes. You know, especially when you're dealing with people, I would say when they're not in our world, we'll say, of what we've experienced and how we understand it now, that it looks like them were living in a bubble. You know, of separation, of being disconnected. But I would say to them, but I'm disconnected from your reality and the reality that you're creating. It isn't my reality, and the world that I live in and my experience of how it unfolds is based on that. It's exactly the same for you. And for you, because you're living in this fearful world, that you're living in this anxious world, that you're living, and literally it's how it filters the information, it filters how you see the world. And like it to the old tinted sunglasses, if you're wearing brown sunglasses, the world looks brown. That's it. So if you're anxious or you're depressed, that's literally the same thing. So everything you see out into the world is reflected through that. But that's yours. And it may come as a bit of a surprise to you, but that's not actually how it works. You know? And the answer is there, and the freedom is there, and the spaces. When you're talking about the constriction, to me, when I saw this for myself, and I used to refer to it as the shrinking down my world, was to do with controlling my world, because I didn't want to feel this. I was doing my best. Like you say, you're talking about the vigilance, and you're talking about the thought police, making sure that there was no evil thoughts coming in, and there was this thought or that thought coming. And for me, my version of that was shrinkage. You know, and when I discovered it had nothing to do, it had to do with me trying to control my world and control my thinking. So I wouldn't feel that, because I thought that was real.
Right. Yeah.
That it just, and there's no life in it, because we're kind of literally psychologically squeezing the life and the joy out of it. Yeah, it's suffocating. And constriction is a beauty, because that's what we're doing. But it's actually, the truth is that it's the opposite to it. We're denying ourselves when we misunderstand this experience. It's actually the other way completely.
Right. Yeah.
And all you know, and I spoke about this with to a client the other evening. What happens is, when people, that adage of when one door closes, another one opens. Yeah, you know, to a certain degree, I agree that as long as you say that the door opens out into a vast expanse, not into a hallway, you know, because the moment that door opens, it opens into a whole new world of creation. You are literally free to create. So if one door closes, if the door in front of you is opening, as long as in here, and it's now I have an opportunity to create something brand new. Now you're expanding. Now you're getting it. And I love your arc of all of this has been the perfect example of every time you've closed something, something else has opened up, and it has led to this incredible expression of Hannah's life. I mean, you've all the elements. You have the trauma, you have the creativity, you have the recognition of it,
Yeah.
but you have the service of it, and the understanding of it, and the delivery of it, and as best as we humanly can, an understanding of it. And that is just so rich. And like I say, part of this whole arc of these conversations was just about that. You know, everything is possible. And having so many people come on, like yourself, like from Jerusalem, from Malibu, from England, from Ireland, across the world. This isn't unique to one person or a couple of privileged people. This is humanity. Right. This is what we're talking about. And I love that. I absolutely love that, like, the power of modern communication that connects the world together to say it's exactly the same. Who you are, where you are, what color, what creed, what sexuality, it doesn't matter. You're part of the humanness. And this is what's available to you. Isn't that marvelous?
You know, listening to you talk, I am so excited to find out what's coming next. I don't know.
I know. And you know, all of these calls have shown me so clearly the uniqueness of who we are. Expressing the one thing. Because I've had this conversation over and over and over and over, and each time I sit down to have these conversations, I'm excited about what's going to turn up. How's the expression of this going to show up today? What is the expression of Hannah? What is the expression of Dan? What is the expression of Billy? When we discuss the movement of this understanding or this innate wisdom, like I say, the non-religious aspect is the feeling of the universe or God or energy or whatever is moving through us. It's incredible. And what we are unique expressions of this. And I've seen this with this whole Black Lives, the opening of this. I think they're dead right. You know, this conversation does need to be opened up. It just does need to be opened up. But I'm not going to politicize the conversation here. But what I'm going to say is this. Why are we in a hurry to change everybody else to be like us? Look at the uniqueness of every human being in this planet and the celebration of it, and the food and the culture and the music and the skin color and how this community has evolved this way and how we've evolved this way in the unique perfection of where we are. And the variety of foods, the variety of music, the variety of conversation, the variety of clothes, the variety of environment, right. And how it adds extraordinary texture to the experience of living there. And embracing that, you know, knowing that every single person that's bringing this to the world is that unique expression. But we're expressing exactly the same thing, but just in how we see it. It's brilliant. You know, it's brilliant. Black lives do matter, you know, because of the expression of who they are. That's it. They are human beings. We're all human beings. It doesn't matter what the expression is. Let's celebrate it. And the longer I go on with this, the more impassioned it lights me up every time to even think about, wow, wouldn't life be a blancmange if we didn't have this? Wouldn't it just be flat and samey? The experience would be kind of flat and samey. You know, but it's the richness and the texture and the joy and the music and it's full of everything that's right. The only thing that gets in the way is our judgment of it. Mm-hmm. Isn't life marvelous? It's just life marvelous, really, when it boils down to it. And it's actually 11:06.
My face is hurting from smiling so much. That's just talking to you.
It's 11. You see,
disappear because my kitten just woke up.
Yay! That is perfect timing, kitten. You know, look at you. You're gorgeous. That's perfect timing. Because I was
Yeah.
saying, it's 11. It's an hour and 5 minutes later
Oh,
into the
well.
conversation. You know what I mean? And that's what I told you. We have failed in this. And when I took the cap off of all of this, these marvelous conversations. Sure.
Mhm.
If people are looking for you or want to find more about the work that you're doing or want to connect with you and discuss this issue of pain in the body and the psychological, how would they locate you? Where would they find you?
Right, thank you. I have a website. It's my name. It's spelled CHANASTUDLEY.com, hannahstudley.com. And there you can connect with me through the contacts there. And there's my story and a lot of the things, programs I offer and information about pain and that kind of stuff on the website. I have a Facebook group. It's been going for just over a year now. We have like 1,300 people in there, and it's primarily bringing these ideas, about the mind, the work of Sydney Banks to people who are suffering from chronic pain. But it's really just a great resource for learning about the principles and these ideas. And it's called TMS, Chronic Pain and the Three Principles. That's on Facebook. I'm on Facebook, so you can just put my name in and people can find me. So I'd love to hear from anybody. And my book, the first book, is on Amazon. It's called The Myth of Low Self-Esteem. And the next one that I hope to be published, but maybe the end of the year, is going to be called Painless.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Obviously brilliant. Yeah.
Thanks to my friend's 18-year-old daughter, she's like, well, just call it Painless. I said, brilliant.
How am I going to call this wordly titled book about losing your pain?
Yeah, so that's like a chronic pain adventure novel. And like all my books, I think, are going to be novels because there's so much misinformation out there, and there's so much research and stuff that I'd love people to know about, but not everybody's weird like me who wants to read research. So I thought by putting it into novels and story form, then people can like get engrossed in the story and learn and grow and on the journey with the characters. That's really my idea with the writing, is like these journeys that the characters go on to just come through something very difficult. Like the first one was trauma. This one's going to be about pain. I'm planning on writing one on maybe menopause, on addictions. Like there's so many topics where people are suffering, and maybe a story can help them, get to some new ideas. So
I love that. I love the idea of telling a story. It must be the Irish in me. I don't know. We love a good story. Yeah. And that is a wonderful way. Hey, Aesop figured it out. Aesop figured it out.
Right.
That people love a good story. So we've all grown up with Aesop's fables.
Right.
And the wisdom that he implanted in all those stories. The Enlightened Gardener, another perfect example of it. So it becomes about the intent rather than the content, and the intent through the story. And I love that. I love that. Can you hold on a sec for me, Hannah, and I'll just say good luck to everybody. Yes. What a fantastic conversation, Hannah. Thank you so much, because we've covered such a gamut of everything here, from creation to moving fast pain to growth to spirituality. It's been a marvelous conversation. I hope anybody that has watched this and is going to watch this, thank you all so much for taking the time. I do hope that you find it equally as engrossing as I have for the last hour and 10 minutes, give or take. It's been a marvelous ride. Thank you all for joining us, and there's more to come. Bye for now.
Okay, bye.